excited about this conversation that we're going to be having with Raul today. Thank you for coming to this seminar. And how's everyone feeling? Good, right? And you know what? I think we could do just a little bit better than that. Come on, y'all, right? It's Friday. We're having a great time at Palm Springs. There we go. That's the spirit. Exactly. That's the spirit. Um, and so I'm very excited to get started. We have an amazing conversation with Raul here, and we're also going to have Nancy and Doug come up and talk about the Uber initiative in a bit as well. So thank you for coming, and let's get started. Okay. What if the most important work that we do as trial lawyers never happens in a courtroom? What if the future of access to justice is being decided right now in rooms that most of us never step into? Today's conversation is not a traditional keynote, it's not a lecture. It's a real conversation about responsibility, about influence, and the role that we play in shaping the systems that we operate in. Our keynote speaker has tried and handled some of the most complex cases in the country, from catastrophic injury to aviation disasters to cutting edge litigation against some of the largest companies in the world. But what makes Raul different is not just what he does in the courtroom, it's what he chooses to do outside of it. Please join me in welcoming Rahul Ravipudi.
Thanks for having me. Thanks, Kenny.
And Raul, what I want to do is I want us to start right there, right here at the beginning, because I think context matters. A lot of people in this room know about your results. They know your cases, but I don't think everyone knows exactly what shaped you into who you are and who you've become in this profession. I've heard you talk about your mother, her work as an environmental engineer, and your early exposure to meaningful cases in your career. Can you talk to us a little bit about that growing up and your early career and how that shaped you and the way that you view things?
Yeah. So I don't have any lawyers in my family. I grew up with a science background. My dad, a PhD chemical engineer. My mom, a nuclear physicist and environmental engineer. My brother's a doctor. When I thought I wanted to go to law school, everybody's heads exploded. The market for lawyers was terrible. It was a uncertain career from their perspective. But I really wanted to do it in large part because of my mom. And what she used to do was she worked for the California Energy Commission, and all of those oil rigs that were functioning off of the coast, she would go inspect them, find all these violations, and then levy fines against ExxonMobil and all the large oil companies. And then she'd have meetings with them, and 12 lawyers would show up. My mom's about, she says it this way, 5 feet, 1 centimeter. And all of these lawyers in their suits would come, and then she would just school them. And then they'd have to pay what they had to pay. And this was kind of our dinner time conversation every evening. And I don't know why her schooling a bunch of lawyers made me want to become one, but it was just that concept and that ability to advocate and communicate that inspired me to want to become a lawyer. And then when I was in law school, in the end of my second year, I was in the summer working at the Ventura DA's office, prosecuting successfully fishing without a license trials. And and then I got a call from one of my law school classmates who said, "You got to come over to Green Broilette. This partner, Jeff Wells, his law clerk just left, and you got to come over here." I had zero exposure to personal injury, trial law in the civil world. I didn't even know really that it existed, believe it or not. And then I went and met with Jeff, and I could not have been luckier to have been inspired by one of the nicest and most zealous advocates on the planet. So, Jeff, I can't believe, yes, and please give Jeff a round. Yes. And I just have to say, because I mean, it's been almost 30 years since that time when Jeff hired me. And why he hired me, I don't know. He just kind of he goes, "You know what? I still remember the interview." He goes, "Can you write?" I said, "I wrote a law review article." He goes, "It doesn't matter if you can write or not. We'll figure all this out." And he goes, "My bigger question to you is, do you want to do this type of work?" And I said, "Well, what do you do?" And he said, "Okay, well, I'll give you an example. I've got this case. His name is Orbro Gandy. And he was working, where there was a wood chipper out there and they were chipping a bunch of wood into sawdust. and then they put the wrong hardness of metal on the actual wood chippers. And then what ended up happening is chips of hot metal would go right into the hopper with the sawdust. Smoke started coming out, and poor Orbro was 25 feet away when somebody saw the smoke, opened up, backdraft, big fireball comes out. Orbro's burned over like 40% of his body. And he said, "So, this is a clear act of negligence, and I represent Orbro, and I want to make sure he gets taken care of and gets the medical care he needs and compensated for the changes in his life. And I've just done a poor job of describing it the way Jeff did. But right when he did that, there was a spark in my eyes. And I go, I didn't even know that this is what I want to do. This is who I want to learn from. And Jeff showed me the ropes for like 2+ years before he then sent me out to the Wolves to work with Walter Lack. But it was amazing. And what that taught me from the very beginning was two things. One, you need to always have the right purpose, and the right purpose is always to help people. And if you lose focus of that, then you've really lost your ability to be a good trial lawyer. And second, help other people out because our job as lawyers is to raise the trial bar. And Jeff was the inspiration for me to really start to do that and start to do that early in my career.
Thank you, Rahul. And I think that's so important because it really sets up everything that we're going to be talking about here. I think most attorneys, maybe some even in this room at some point in our lives, have viewed advocacy as something that starts and ends in the courtroom. But that's not the case for you. You've been very involved outside of the courtroom in Sacramento, especially. What's happening right now that trial lawyers should be mindful of, to be looking at, and why they should be paying attention to what is happening outside of the courtroom?
Well, okay, so just to kind of take a step back for anybody who hasn't gone and spoken to any legislator, the lobbyists for private interests is so unbelievably powerful. You don't even really appreciate how powerful it is until you see it in action. And I'll just give you an example. I was co-lead counsel on the Thomas Fire litigation when the fires happened out and that destroyed most of Ventura County, resulted in 23 deaths with the landslides. And in litigating those cases, it came to my attention that Edison, PG&E, and Sempra Energy were heading up to Sacramento and trying to work on immunities, caps, and other ways to avoid any responsibility. And so I went and met with some legislators, Frank Petrie, others, and I thought it was going to be an easy argument. Walking in there and saying, "Hey, these utility companies are making billions of dollars. All they got to do is maintain their equipment. They don't do that because you guys are protecting them. So how about we don't protect them and they can actually be accountable?" And when I say not protecting them, anytime they have to pay a dollar, they just go and petition the CPUC and say, raise the rates so that us as taxpayers and constituents here in the state of California can pay for their negligence. And then our rates go up, and then everybody's unhappy, and then more fires happen, and more people die, and more people lose their lives. It seems like a pretty easy thing that the concept of accountability actually leads to reform. But I walk in there and they're like, "Man, this climate change, it's a real problem for us, you know? And because of this climate change, all these poor utility companies, they could go bankrupt if we don't protect them, and we got to keep the lights on." I was like, and I said, "Whoa, take a step back. Did climate change just happen today? Because I think this is the worst kept secret. And these utility companies for over a decades, have chosen not to maintain their equipment. And now that climate change has creeped up on them with their equipment, which isn't like wine, it doesn't get better over time, right? Then, they're now creating the problem and now they're asking for a bailout. And it's now litigating the Eaton fire cases and seeing this thing happen time and time again, it just frustrates me to watch how these utility companies and every other private interest group, Uber now, is going in and trying to use the legal system to eliminate any responsibility.
And speaking of the power that private interest has in lobbying, what does grassroots lobbying look like for trial attorneys, for attorneys?
I mean, it looks like what this room looks like right here, with a lot of advocates actually spending the time speaking to their local legislators, making sure we get the influence, speaking to your communities about what matters so that they can talk as well. And then working, of course, with Nancy and Doug and the fearless leaders of CAOC to make sure that the right message is getting across because they have their fingers on the pulse and they have their ear to the ground of everything that's happening in Sacramento. And so it's nice to know where the rumblings are so that we can try and get ahead of it.
Yeah, and Roel, I think if every attorney were to take a moment and think about this, they'd go, "Yeah, you know what? I should get involved." Right? That this is something that is important. And then, we go back to our everyday lives and we have our cases and we have families. We have a lot of stuff that's happening and maybe people may not make the time for that. What is it that you think might be keeping attorneys from getting engaged? And what's the, messaging for us as a trial attorney group, as attorneys, as consumer attorneys to become involved, to take that step?
I mean, that's such a hard question to answer. I can just speak from my own personal experience and everything I do, I think about my kids. So I've got three boys. They're now 20, 17, and 14. And when they were younger, I wonder, like, hey, I have a lot of clients that come in and they come in the most heartbroken and really gut wrenching situations, and all of it preventable. And so I wonder, am I doing enough not just to help my client, but to protect my kids from what my client's going through, to make sure things are safe for them? And so when I'm looking at each of these cases, and then I think, okay, outside the courtroom, can there be legislation passed that can actually protect the public better to make sure what happened to my client doesn't happen to anybody else? Is there something that can be done in an industry where you force them to say, here's the industry changes we're going to make because we have to, because at least through this litigation, I've got the pressure on them at this moment where we can make reform happen. Are there ways where I can be the police and make sure that that industry is doing what they need to? And we can do that in a lot of different ways. And so, for example, I think a lot of people know about Paul Lee, the 19-year-old nonverbal autistic child who was left on a school bus and ultimately suffered from hyperthermia and died. And because he was vulnerable and helpless. And the school bus driver didn't do what he was supposed to do to make sure that all the students were off the bus. So the Paul Lee Bus Safety Act was put into law, which then made sure that an alarm goes off at the back of the bus, which can only manually be turned off, forcing the bus driver to do what they need to do. Alex's law, I came to learn unbelievably that you need to be CPR certified to become a teacher, but schools don't really need to have anybody as an adult that's CPR certified. And poor Alex was a 14-year-old kid in a lifeguarded swimming pool at a high school in Marietta, and was drowning and wasn't saved, and nobody was there to provide CPR, and he ultimately died. So Alex's law now makes it available that for CPR certification to make sure there's actual adults on premises to make sure our kids are safe. But then, braking issues and trucking companies with their brakes and they get overloaded, putting in laws like that. And with them, it wasn't through laws. We have industry changes where they actually changed their practices during our litigation. So thinking about our cases and thinking about what we do outside of just what's in the courtroom to make sure we can actually protect the public. And then that goes kind of further with our free time, and I know we have every choice and luxury to spend the free time in different ways. But one of the things that I do, I got appointed to be on the Casey committee with Chris Bagnoli and Mike Kelly, a bunch of appellate court justices, trial judges, and we go through the jury instructions, make sure they're updated. When anybody in the community says that the law is wrong, we have to go through and fix all of these things. And it keeps me in tune with what happens in the courtroom. It makes we, as Mike, Chris, and I, we're kind of the plaintiff perspective in front of a bunch of defense lawyers and appellate court justices to make sure that plain meaning gets communicated in front of a jury and that each of you has the opportunity to do that through the jury instructions, which we know Casey is what dominates in the trial courts. So there's a lot of things that we can do to actually help each other and help the community be safe. The question is, what inspires you? And if your inspiration is helping your clients and helping prevent and make the world a safer place, then there's so many opportunities for you to do that.
Thank you, Rahul. And the idea of stepping into spaces that where we can carve a bigger or create a bigger impact in any single case really lends itself into another area that you've been very involved in recently, specifically the social media addiction cases, which in many ways are defining a new frontier of litigation. Can you tell us a little bit about those cases, like why you got involved and what makes those cases so different? And honestly, I've been following it on the news. You read about it, articles. It's so interesting and they're so fascinating in many ways. Can you talk to us a little bit about that and the work that you're doing there?
Yeah, and this is a perfect example of what Uber is trying to squelch, right? One of the things that we have the opportunity to do is take cases, and they may not be the easiest cases, right? Sometimes there are a lot of hard cases out there, but I kind of run with the smell test. If it doesn't seem right, it's not right. And 3.5 years ago on the social media cases, we filed lawsuits and it got coordinated in LA Superior Court, and I got appointed as one of the co-lead counsel on it. And the reason we did it, I wasn't sure if we were going to win. But what I did know is these apps, as designed, were addicting children, taking them away from sunlight, right? And this is a perfect example of me thinking about my kids. They, a small or big way, were ruining my own kids. And I thought, this is just going to destroy a generation and it could just destroy generations to come. And whether we win or lose in the courtroom, you know that there's internal documents there and when we started, and now there's so many smoking guns as to how really evil these companies are and how they competed in a race to the bottom to make their apps so addictive that they really affect children for the rest of their lives. And with addiction, any addiction, whether it's alcohol, tobacco, drugs, social media, gambling, once you become an addict, it affects every part of your life. And as a child, we all know that for children, these types of effects, they get magnified. And with developing brains, they become permanent and rewire their brains so early in their lives that are going to affect them not just now, but forever. And that's just heartbreaking. And so we got involved in these cases in part really just to shine a light on these companies. And I thought, even if we lose in trial, we won because we're putting it out there. And now everybody, legislators, the community at large, are going to see these companies for who they are and are going to start to change. And thank goodness we won. And we've got the next trial July 27th. And then we're going to have a trial after that and after that until they actually start to do the right thing. But after getting the verdict, I don't know if anybody saw, YouTube immediately put out press release. Hey, we just implemented parental controls. You can control your kids' usage of YouTube. They just figured it out in 12 hours, right? All of these things, sadly, are just pressers, just public optics, and their internal documents say exactly that. Addiction is a good metric in this industry. Problematic use. Yeah, we put out all these parental controls, but we know none of them work and we designed them for none of them to work. And why do you need parental controls? Because you got a problem with your apps. How about you just fix them? And so there's a lot that has happened in this case. But what I will say is, speaking personally, it's probably one of the most important bodies of litigation that exists right now because it'll actually change society as it functions here in the United States and for all of the kids going forward. I think iPads are starting to come out of the schools now because there's no point in having a 5-year-old or an 8-year-old on a screen and starting to normalize that type of behavior so early. And when you normalize it in the classroom with a company like YouTube, who's found to be engaging in conscious disregard for the safety of children, then what do you think's going to happen next? Parents are in a helpless situation, and so hopefully the next generation after my kids is going to be a good one.
Thank you. Well, speaking of little kids with iPads, I feel like sometimes I see those little kids and they look like Tony Stark, Iron Man, with all the like electronics, and you're like, oh my goodness, how do they know all this stuff, right? And they pick it up and they become used to it, and they become addicted to it. And how many of us have, whether children or family members, and told them, hey, put the phone down, like I want to talk to you, right? Show of hands, who's ever done that, right? Everybody. Um, How many have said that to themselves, right? Looking at themselves in the mirror, "Hey, like, you need to stop." And it's funny, I think we laugh at it, but thank you for pointing out that it is this insidious nature to it and something that corporations are using to their advantage, and you are on the front lines of putting a stop to that. So can we please give a round of applause to Raul for the work that he's doing for us and children and our generations?
Well, I'll just say it takes a village. There's a lot of tremendous lawyers that are working on this, and that's the amazing thing. Kind of circling back to what we did on social media is the same as your question on grassroots. There are so many amazing plaintiff trial lawyers, not just in this room, but in California that have the ability to move mountains when we're doing it together. And we're starting to see that in the fight against Uber. So I'm grateful for everybody.
Thank you, Raul, for that. In preparing for this, we talked a little bit about what leadership looks like and identity as well. For you, if you can, we'd love to hear your thoughts on this. What does it actually mean to practice law for the right reasons? And what does that look like to you?
Well, I touched on it a little bit with respect to all of the extracurriculars you can do, but we all like, we, COVID, as bad as it was and how impactful it was, did you kind of see and feel like the galvanization of the plaintiff trial bar? We all started, teaching, and we teach in communities like this, and we'd come to, Palm Springs, and then we'll go to Vegas, and we have these focused opportunities. But then it just started to become much more contagious and widespread with being able to do it remotely. And that's something that I think is so important is from our side to always be willing to share 100% of what we're doing to make everybody better, and then to inspire people who are not even lawyers to become lawyers. And so some of the things that we've been doing, like I've been teaching, I taught at Loyola Law School for 13 years, taught trial advocacy, and then kind of had this uh, I don't know why it took so long, but this epiphany that, hey, we're teaching people opening statements, closing arguments, direct and cross examination, and trying to send these new lawyers out into the world and saying, go try cases. And they go into a courtroom, and what's the first thing you got to do? You got to pick a jury. Who taught them anything about that? So we started teaching voir dire over at Loyola Law School, which was so much fun. And it's just fun seeing everybody's eyes light up. And now that's a class that's being taught at Southwestern. It's being taught at different schools across the country. But kind of giving those opportunities. And then through LA Abota, we started a mock trial program at LA for LAUSD and have about 200 students come in and trying to inspire high school students, a lot of underprivileged high school students who maybe have had no exposure to lawyers, to see what it's like to get inspired and then to pursue a career in law and maybe even as trial lawyers to try and increase both the diversity and the scope and the number of advocates out there. And so there's a lot of things that we can do to continue to help each other and to help each other really with expecting nothing in return. And I think that's really what the true purpose is if you're doing it for the right reason. You're not doing it just because you hope to get something in return from somebody, but you're doing it because you actually want to help the community. So I think that's what a large part of what it's got to be about. And then you have leaders like I I told Doug Seltzer this morning that and Jeff was president of CAOC as well, but this is a thankless job that you guys have. It's it's a thankless job and it's an impossible job, and there's so many with each trial lawyer out there, that's a whole new opinion coming your way, right? And so you have all these voices coming your way, and you need to uh, keep everybody together, keep everybody inspired, move the ball forward, and lead with both integrity and with competency. And I am just so impressed with what Doug's been doing since he became president. And I think we should all give him a little round of applause, please. I mean, thank you, Doug, for everything that you're doing. But leaders like that, he's basically shut down his whole practice to do something that um, is more impactful. It's impacting every single one of us and in every single one of our clients. And if there's something that you can uh, kind of sit back and reflect on, and I hope Doug gets to do this as every past president, it's pretty amazing what you're doing. And it's something that's going to change the landscape of the legal community and the public safety here in California for decades to follow.
Yeah, thank you. And you mentioned Doug. We have a recent past presidents, Jeff Wells and Greg Rizzio here.
Right. Well, I didn't mean to ignore you, Greg.
And when we look at our presidents and past presidents, see the leadership that they've shown, especially in these difficult times, right? Can you speak to our audience here as well as people who might be interested in leadership, in becoming a little bit more involved? What are the qualities that differentiate those people from those attorneys who are just practicing and those who step up and take those mantles of leadership?
Well, first is desire, right? For anybody who wants to do it, there are opportunities for you to do it. Second is humility, because just because you want to do it doesn't mean that today you're qualified to be the president of CAOC, to be the president of CALA, to be the president of the CAOIE, right? So you got to pay your dues. And by paying your dues, you start to learn what it takes to be a leader. And so every time you're willing to learn and want to help, you're continuing to rise that ladder to gain the competency to then become a leader. And this is my personal opinion. I think having tremendous empathy is an important thing about being a leader of a trial bar, because you've got to actually be worried about um, others more than you're worried about your own ego. And you can kind of see that, not kind of, you can actually see that in the history of the leaders here of CAOC in particular. And Liz back there, president of CALA right now. I mean, we have some leaders that lead by example and not leading because they want a trophy, not leading because they want a bunch of attaboys or attagirls. They're doing it because they want to actually help the community. And if that's where your head's at, you're going to be an amazing leader.
Well, we have a round of applause for these amazing leaders that are present with us today. Thank you all.
You too, by the way.
Thank you. And as we sort of begin our descent here in this conversation, which has been amazing, thank you so much, Raul. I do want to ask you on a personal level, it's just between us, nobody else is here. How do you balance success with service? You know, especially in a world or industry sometimes that can reward results above all else.
Well, I this is this is my continued state of mind. Well, first of all, I get humbled every day at home. My boys humble me. And then I have the most amazing wife. My wife is Smitha, is the CEO of USC Care and USC Keck, and she's a total badass. And so, I just get to live in a world where uh, I'm surrounded by great people. But I have never I don't think about success. Okay. So it's not like I wake up in the morning and go, gosh, I'm a really successful lawyer. Or go to sleep at night saying, wow, I did something really successful today. Right. And so I do think that in service, which is what I think all of us do, we serve our clients. And if we think about our clients first when we wake up in the morning, if we think about them during the day and what we can do to be the best for them in all aspects of their life in the role we play, and go to sleep with that state of mind, then everything you do is service based. And I believe that if you're service based, whatever success you have will come. If your focus is on success, you're going to do a disservice for your clients, and that success may always be unattainable. And I just don't think it leads to a happy life, right? Because if all you're looking for is, am I the best? There's always somebody out there that's better than you. Okay. Sorry. There just is. And so you're never going to be happy in life. And so that's why, kind of sticking with your North Star, your moral compass being helping our clients, you're gonna have the happiest, most successful life.
Thank you, Raul. And this is the final question. If there's one thing that every lawyer here should do differently after today, what would that be?
Well, that's tough with this crowd because everybody in here that I'm seeing really does a lot. But I think the one thing well, two things here. I love what I do. So when I love what I do, I don't come home tired at night feeling like I've just been worn out because I don't enjoy my job. I love everything that I do about it. 99% of what I do about it. And so if there's something more you can do to help the community, do it. If there's some other aspect, do it. And one thing, it's great to be uncomfortable. So, no matter what area you practice in, I don't practice in social media litigation. I do now. I didn't practice in wildfire litigation, and I do now. I've done antitrust cases, complex business litigation cases, securities cases, aviation cases, product liability, personal injury across the board, right? And so, trying different things where you see that there's a difference that you can make makes you a better lawyer because you've got to still use those trial skills to both extract the evidence and discovery and prove your case. And proving your case in such different areas of law, you'll see the crossover and how much it makes you a better lawyer in whatever area you generally practice in.
Oro, thank you for highlighting and reminding us that the courtroom, while that might be the place where we fight for our clients, it's not the only place that matters. Thank you for your conversation. Why don't we give Raul a big round of applause for his time?
Uh, Thank you all. Thank you. Oh, you're going to make me blush.